gray winter day in an old hotel.
I didn't think you'd be here.
No, of course you wouldn't. That's because you.
What?
What do you want?
I said some things last night, as you know,
Yeah,
and I want to apologize.
apologize.
Yeah,
The things you said weren't the truth?
I didn't say that.
You said Inland Empire was boring and a chore to sit through, that it was David Lynch's worst movie, that it looks like garbage, and that you never want to see it again. Was that the truth?
Are you crying? Why are you crying? He's still my favorite director.
I'm sorry, Andy. I'm so sorry. Wait. This sounds just like our podcast. Hi, and welcome to Faffing about Film.
I'm Andy,
I'm Vivian.
and today we're going to tell you about one movie we saw.
Yes, very special movie. It's not a really new movie, although you're used to that by now if you've listened to us before. That
Yeah.
we do talk about some really old movies.
Yeah, new movies kind of suck most of the time, but
Well, depends. But so this time we went and saw the remaster of David Lynch's Inland Empire, this
yeah.
movie from 2006, and it's recently been remastered and re-released in theaters, limited run. It's kind of an art house movie. So
Yeah.
we went and saw it at the Plaza Theater in Atlanta, which is this old theater from like the 1930s.
hmm
So I think it's one of the oldest theaters in Atlanta still operating. I think that and the Fox. And we had a great experience.
Yeah, I had never been there before, but you had.
I had seen Inland Empire back when it came out originally. I've been there also to see Rocky Horror once, but they still play it, I think. But back in 2006, I saw Inland Empire when it was first released at the same theater, which is, it's a theater that they do like art house movies and stuff too. So, I mean, they do have like release Star Wars and stuff too. So, but I saw Inland Empire back then, and it was really nice to go back and watch it there again.
Yeah, I mean, I had never been, and it's kind of like, hey, wait, these are the theater seats from when I was a kid.
Yeah, it looks like a real movie theater, like an old movie theater.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a neat experience. Lots of classic kitsch on the wall. They had a lot of stuff from where they had done a showing of The Room and The Disaster Artist.
They had a cool RKO logo on a wall too.
Oh yeah.
Which we got a picture of, which was really neat. I wonder
Very
if that's
Rocky
old.
Horror.
Yeah, that's right. I was wondering if that was maybe from before, but yeah, you're right that it does show up at the end of Rocky Horror. So
Yeah.
it's probably been repainted a few times since then.
Yeah.
But it's really nice. It's kind of a small theater, like the corridors and stuff. It kind of looks like an old building.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very enjoyable. The movie itself is difficult as ever, but I think that the remaster helped a lot with some of the issues that it had visually upon release, which we're going to talk about. But I don't mean difficult, in a entirely bad way. It's actually a very rewarding movie, very worth it. But well, yeah, you'll see when we discuss it.
I also want to talk about another thing in our theater experience. Immediately before Inland Empire, they were showing the original Star Wars, and some guy coming out of that was like, "So, what's Inland Empire about?" To which you replied,
It's about a girl in trouble.
and
Which is the original tagline of the movie. Which we'll
mhm,
talk about that when we talk about how the production and how David Lynch promoted the movie back in 2006.
right. And the clerk nearby got it and like was laughing. Oh, good one, because it was good.
Well, it's like one of those times when it was funny because Inland Empire is it that's all David Lynch would say at the time.
Yeah.
They would ask him, "What is it about? What is it about?" And he would go about, "It's about a girl in trouble." That's, and I think they had like a tagline for the movie, "A girl in trouble" or something like that. And he wouldn't say anything else. He would be like mum about it,
Yeah.
to just go see it, and he would just say it's about a girl in trouble. And it was kind of a joke because the movie is it is that, but it's a lot more. And
Yeah.
it felt kind of a joke that it was so reductive, so many movies could be a girl in trouble.
Mhm.
But
It's like almost all of his movies.
and I never got the chance to someone actually asking, and you could just deliver the tagline like that. It was fantastic.
Nice. So what is David Lynch?
David Lynch is a film director, American film director. Probably if you're listening to this podcast about Inland Empire, you probably know who he is, but he's an American film director that he's done movies like Blue Velvet, The Lost Highway, The Elephant Man, Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, all famous art house kind of movies, sort of strange, surreal, I think is the word for Lynch movies.
Yeah.
They're very surreal, and they create a certain mood of their own.
And this is probably his most enduring social impact or whatever. His most enduring cultural impact is from Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks, yes.
Which is popular then. It's come back around, and they did a third season like 5 years ago at this point, but still, like,
yeah,
it doesn't feel that long ago.
Yeah, that's right. Twin Peaks was huge at the time. And it's still huge, I think, culturally. I mean, it's such a great series, you can rewatch it now. And I mean, of course, it's of its time and, the tropes of its time, but it's still really good.
And you can see like ripples and references to it like throughout popular culture now.
So
but that's who David Lynch were.
So David Lynch, after he did Twin Peaks, he made a series of movies throughout the 90s that are really good. Some of my favorite movies ever, which were what introduced me to him, actually. And then at the end of the 90s, in the 2000s, he went into a more experimental phase with digital technology and the new possibilities of the new medium, like, the internet and digital video, which was starting to really pick up at the time. It was still very primitive, but he loved the possibilities of it. And so he went into this experimental phase and he just started shooting things. And there's lots of things that he did at the time, like, weird animation, stop motion stuff, and little skits and sketches that he would just put on his website. His website, much like David Bowie at the time. In fact, a little bit earlier, David Bowie, and a bit early around that time, actually, David Bowie was also enamored with the digital medium, the digital distribution, the
possibilities of the internet.
The possibilities of the internet, and he had created something called BowieNet back in the late 90s. And he had, for the first time, he was like listening to, he made an album called Hours, which it was about him recapping his career, sort of like reconsidering his career, but from the point of view of listening to his stuff online and seeing people talk about it online, which was a different thing at the time, and he was one of the first major artists to release like a new song over the internet that people could download, and he had like service that you could pay, and you had access to these forums and sort of early social network kind of thing. And he would actually hang out in the forums of the website.
Bowie.
Yeah, David Bowie. But anyway, so David Lynch was in a similar mind space with regards to the possibilities of digital technology and the internet. So he created davidlynch.com, which it was another website that he had a subscription on, and that you sort of had a direct connection basically to the things that he was working at without him having to go through a studio and things like that.
Yeah.
So today it's like, today you're listening to it. It's a podcast, there's YouTube, but at the time it was that whole digital distribution thing was very, very new. And an artist and a movie director in particular, he was pretty much one of the only movie directors who really go full digital.
Mm-hmm.
Doing this that's sort of going like almost like experimental and straight to the fans, basically to the audience, was pretty unheard of at the time.
Yeah.
And nowadays you have entire websites of artists doing things like this, not even as experimental as his stuff or Bowie stuff was. But David Lynch, so he had all these things that he would shoot and he would post them on his website. And this is after he had completed Mulholland Drive, which is another one of his biggest movies. Like from 1999, he had a lot of success with Mulholland Drive. And so he had started shooting some things here and there. And like I said, all kinds of experimental stuff, animation, skits and stuff, even like vlog kind of thing, like vlog,
Mm-hmm.
like people just talking to a camera, talking about their day kind of thing. And he had,
his famous weather report.
Well, that's his weather report, but part of something that became Inland Empire was Darkened Room, which started as some girl in Japan talking about her day, and then she switched to English, and she would talk about I have a friend and she's in a room and she can't escape. Can you see her? Can you see her? And sort of like you would see like glimpses of her friend in this room, and this sort of like digital darkness, very, very, very scary kind of stuff.
I have a friend. My friend is sitting in Darkened Room. My friend is crying.
And Darkened Room and other things that he was doing at the time, he said that he was filming things, but he thought that they would come together, but he didn't have an idea yet of how. So he just kept shooting things, and eventually, this is what became Inland Empire, which includes some of those ideas, some reworked, some almost straight. Like he had a kind of quote unquote sitcom, like surreal sitcom, that was called Rabbits, where these people are in rabbit costumes, which is sort of like saying non sequiturs to each other, Mm-hmm. He had in the early 90s, for example, he had the angriest dog in the world, which was this cartoon that would never change. It was this dog that was always angry, and there would be some sort of weird.
It would have a different caption each time.
Caption, yeah.
But it would be like the same. It's just a dog pulling against its chain.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of these things made it into Inland Empire in this sort of patchy quality of it. It's kind of an Inland Empire because you can tell in the themes, when we talk about the themes, that there's several themes going on, but they all get their own through line, I think. And they end up being interwoven, but you have to follow them separately, but they all come together, I think.
Yeah, the Inland Empire kind of seems like a fix-up novel. It's like where you have a collection of short stories that have you've published elsewhere and stuff, but like you need to get like a through line through them to like combine them into a book or collection. and give like kind of a narrative.
Sort of. I mean, to me, it never seems like it is that separate because there's very strong themes. I think there's very strong through lines.
Right, but that's like part of why I didn't understand the movie the first 5 times. But
hey, first 2.
right, but like when I found out about it, that it's like, oh, it's like he made it from pieces that he'd made earlier separately, but what is the through line? And then you see the through line, and then when you move your shoulder, I see it.
Then it works, right?
And it works.
Well,
yes.
part of it, it's sort of known, is known as his most difficult movie, I think.
Absolutely.
Because, and also coming from an era where he was making these movies in Hollywood that, they were weird and everything, but they had a much more, there was a mystery and weirdness going on, but there seemed to be more of a that you could have a key and you could unlock them. You could, you think about you think about Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway, or of course Wild at Heart, but Wild at Heart has no mystery really. It's just fun. But in Fire Walk with Me, which is more weird in that regard, but they had a kind of story through line. And Inland Empire is experimental in that it really doesn't. It's like several pieces of a story and several different characters and timelines all put together and played by the same people. Most notably Laura Dern. And it's all sort of like stacked together. And when you're in it, in that, and coupled with the technical aspect of the digital video, which I'm going to talk in a moment, it's very confusing. It's very difficult to grasp. Yeah. But I think his movies are more, the concept of the fridge logic, that it's when you watch a movie or read a book or something and you don't get it right away, but then you get up and you go get something from the fridge, to eat. And then you go like, oh, I got it now.
Yeah. The pieces fall into place in your brain when you're not thinking about it. And it's like, hey, wait, I understand.
Right. So his movies
it's about a girl in trouble.
Very much like that. But Inland Empire, I think, is the one that is more of those, much more of those, I think.
Yeah. It is just like so far out there that, I was like, after we'd watched it in the theater that time and you understood it, I was kind of frightened. It was a very, you were rambling, your eyes were glowing, you had like galaxy brain energy, and it was incredible.
Yeah.
I'm nowhere near that.
Well, I'm thinking this podcast that I want to recommend to you, Faffing about film. I think they're going to do an episode on it. Oh, wait, this is our podcast.
Sounds just like our podcast.
Sounds just like our podcast. Well, that's a joke with a movie that, we'll talk about in a bit. But so one of the biggest things about the movie is that Lynch is known for making these very beautiful movies that are, they're difficult or they're mysterious or anything, but they're very beautifully shot and everything in traditional film.
Yeah. Like shots are very deliberate. He puts a lot of details in them. Like reading stories about
Yeah.
I was reading stories about like Eraserhead, where it's like he would put details in these shadows that like they were just telling David, this isn't going to show up on film.
Yeah.
But so long as he knows it's there.
Right.
And then, that's the kind of attention to the detail and backgrounds and stuff that he put into all of his movies on film, so that they're a very rich and interesting thing to watch. Like you pay attention to the furniture in these rooms. So
yeah, but
which he also designs some of the furniture for some of these rooms. So
he does, and he builds. He's all into building stuff with wood.
Nobody's showing Minecraft.
He's kind of a he's kind of a craftsman, and the craft, with your hands kind of thing. It's like he's an all-around craftsman, not just an all-around artist.
He's not just a
I,
filmmaker. He
I,
paints, he does music, he does
I love him.
everything.
I love him. He's great. But anyway, so one of the biggest changes with regards to his style and what makes the movie, I think, more difficult is his use of digital video instead of film. So film has this richness and color and depth and everything, and digital video, which is something he was actually seeking, is the opposite. Is especially digital video of 2001. You know, the camera that he used this most is the Sony PD 150 that doesn't have a great resolution. I mean, it was great for the time, but you know, today, you know, you can buy one for $200 or something. You know, it's a relic. Your phone is better. You know.
Yeah, it's like, if you want an idea of this, go to YouTube and mess with the settings and watch something on maybe 240p. I mean, it's not 144 bad, but you know, it's
it is pretty bad. Yeah. But you know what he was saying, that he actually loved two things about digital video, two big things. First, it was the convenience that he could just carry the camera himself. He didn't have to tell someone to shoot something. He didn't have to move equipment that, you know, like these Panavision cameras that weigh tons. He could just get into an actor's, up into on an actor's face, zoom in, go out, you know, and he can see exactly how it's going to look. With a lot of the times with film, you can't. Yeah. And he also said that it allowed him to, normally when you do film takes, the camera has to be reloaded all the time because film runs very fast. So with the PD 150, he could do takes of 40 minutes straight. So the little DV cassettes, he could do 40-minute takes, and that allowed him, as he said, for the actor's performance to come through. Because so there wasn't any breaks for where the actor had to, okay, I'm waiting and I'm trying to keep my character, okay, again, take again or something. So he could just do things and the actor could just keep getting deeper into the performance, and he really loved that. And I mean, that's something that nowadays, you know, they have the good digital cameras these days. You know, it's something that pretty much all directors have access to. Right. But in those days, it's something that he had embraced because of that. And second, but very important, is the look, and that's something that is preserved even in the remaster that they did, that they upscaled the quality.
We bumped it up to 480p.
Well, actually, it looks a lot better. Actually, I thought it looked really nice. I mean, it still looks like, you know,
it still has all of its DV. Same problems.
Well, it still looks like digital video.
Yeah,
but I think he kind of want to preserve that, because to him, one interesting thing that he said was that film at the end of the 20th century and today, of course, it was a very perfected technology. So it's beautiful, it's rich, it has a fantastic depth, you know, and everything. So he saw in the DV camera with his sort of like shallow
depth
like
of field.
That was like shallow, like getting blown out on lights and darkness. The dark is like pools, and it's an interesting mess. And so he said that it reminded him of film in the 1930s when it wasn't perfected yet. It was all grainy and everything. But he said that in those spaces in between where the quality is lost, the mind can go dreamy. And it's true, like The Inland Empire is probably the best movie made that actually uses those limitations creatively. You know, at first, and of course, you know, at the time he didn't help because he was going like, film is like a dinosaur in a tar pit, you know, something like that. You know, I'm done with film. I'm never doing film again, you know, and stuff like that. But you know, ever since he's changed his opinion, you know, since then. But but I think the whole experimental aspect of it is even more a part of it now, than it was before, because before it was like, oh, this just looks cheap, and now it's like, well, this is an actual experimental piece of art that someone made, taking the limitations into account. And we'll talk about it, but it's like Inland Empire has these very dead pools of black and like these lights that blow out the camera and distort the image. It's fantastic.
My take on the digital video is that generally, like with Lynch's movies, like on film, there is a lot to take in. Everything means something, just like from the furniture in the room to lingering shots of a ceiling fan. You get a lot of the texture and feel of the area as well as the actors. But with the digital, it's like you're right in the actor's face most of the time, and everything is just obscured in darkness beyond them.
Well, that's actually the point.
Yeah.
He was saying, for example, he was talking about in an interview, he was talking about how how much detail there is in film. Even if you have it, that's one of the reasons that they're able to do these magnificent restorations of movies sometimes if they have a good print, because the film captures so much detail that it's not even shown at the time. Yeah. And he was saying that there was so much information in those little squares that when he's doing something for the Elephant Man, and he was saying that you could get too much detail and ruin the mood of the picture. I thought that was really interesting, but that he said that there was a ton of detail in the film, which goes to what you were saying, that in digital video that's not the case, that it's all blown out, it's all kind of dirty looking. That's it's a famous review at the time said that it looked like it was shot inside a toilet.
Yeah. I would have say filmed through coffee grounds, but
yeah, that too. There's a brownness to it. It's weird, but I don't want to give the impression that it's all unpleasantness, because it isn't. There's the fantastic craft of the director, and there's some great scenes and some great sequences, and
right.
That is what keeps you going, even and I think there's definitely a method to his madness with regards to the use of TV there. It's one of his most experimental movies, and it's different from other movies of his,
But yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, is that while it looks bad and like you can only really focus on what's directly in front of you, you get a lot more out of the actors, because it's just like you were saying, that they get to stay in character. You don't have to do like reset up the takes as much, and the actors are just like right there front and center, and you get to see a lot more of them, since that's the only detailed thing in the frame. No weird thing to distract you. But in my theory about the movie, the digital also adds to things, because it's like everything's kind of foggy around the edges, and it's in a way kind of like a dream you barely remember. And I was reading.
There's a very nightmarish atmosphere to it.
Absolutely, and I saw a quote from somewhere that added to the whole thing for me. Was that digital video is the format of home movies, viral videos, and pornography. And with Lynch, everything is like experimental, but everything is also deliberate.
Yeah.
And
just a lot of deliberate, yeah.
And that you're watching this, what ultimately turns out to be a very intense story about sex and life and all kinds of things. But it like feels that much more real because it's happening in a consumer format. Right.
It's I think the idea would be that the parallel maybe would be movies shot, was it 48 frames per second or something like that? Like the Hobbit movie had parts of that where,
I still haven't seen those, but it's like ultra high frame rate.
yeah, the ultra high frame rate, which if you think about it, if you're just going to do it as, oh, we're going to make it more real, no, you make it more real at the expense of making it less of a movie because it looks more like a TV,
Yeah.
and it looks bad. But if you embrace that, if that's what you're looking for, if you try to embrace the limitations, that's when you can do the art. And that's what he was doing with those, with that PD-150 back in the 2000s.
I used to think it was like the hindsight of shooting an arrow and then drawing a bullseye around wherever it lands. But no, I feel like, like the more I found out about the guy, and it's like this was all very intentional.
Oh yeah, I think so too. I used to think that,
like, I'm not coming up with excuses to absolve him of that this movie looks terrible because of reasons. Like, there are reasons.
Well, there are reasons, and I appreciate it actually. I've come out of watching this movie this time much more of a fan of it and much more amazed at how great this movie is. After I watched again, it takes a bit of rumination, it takes a bit of chewing, but it all makes sense. And if you revisit it, knowing certain things, there's little scenes, little things that are even in that graininess, and that are very, very potent, very powerful. And the graininess adds, that the DV, the limitation that it also helps in creating surreal, weird, menacing environments. I think that DV, the way that the DV does the light is very, I don't know, very menacing. Kind of reminds you a bit of TV reports, I don't know, where they're shooting someone from a war or something,
Yeah.
Kind of has that feeling, and it's uncomfortable, and that uncomfortableness is very well used. He knows what he's doing.
And like, is this also the era when reality TV was just kind of blowing up?
That's right. Yeah.
And with this camera format, like, people stop being polite and start being real.
Started being real.
Yeah,
the real world.
And
I think it's one of the era of Big Brother, though.
Proof.
We're still in the era of Big Brother.
But and that adds like a more human touch to some of the drama that happens in this movie.
Mm-hmm. And I think that even with regards to like the in-camera effects he does, like not in camera, but like the effects that he does in the movie, that they're very dreamlike and surreal and very weird. And I think that
really David Lynch,
but that contributes to it,
dreamlike and surreal. It's not like it.
And one more thing that I wanted to say is that it makes the picture, just like what you were saying, that it lets the mind go dreaming. It makes it more hotter. What's called hotter in the Marshall McLuhan sense, where it's any medium that engages your imagination more, that doesn't tell you exactly what you're supposed to be thinking, or any work of art. In the McLuhan parlance is hotter, and the other mediums are colder. But so DV in this case, the way that he uses it is most definitely a hot medium, a very, very hot medium that engages your mind in ways that a traditionally shot film wouldn't have. And I think that's the value of the whole use of DV. Anyway, we can move on from that now.
All right. Let's talk about the plot of this movie now. Plot of the movie is Laura Dern is an actress, and they're going to do a movie called The Blue Yonder.
On High and Blue Tomorrows.
or On High and Blue Tomorrows. Yeah.
It actually really starts with sort of like a shadowy, these two shadowy characters. There's a girl that's in a room with a man, and he's sort of treating her. He's mistreating her. He asks her, would you know what prostitutes do, what whores do, stuff like that. And she seems to be under his sway. And
she's
and then
getting broken in by a pimp, as it would seem.
Well, yeah, and then there's she's watching TV, and the rabbits appear. They will appear more throughout the film, and then we get the image of, that was very striking from the movie always. I remember it was in the trailer and everything back then, of this record playing, like a very close-up of a record playing. You can see the grooves and stuff, and there's a voice that talks about Axon N, the longest running radio play in history, playing in the Baltic region. And then we fade on to Grace Zabriskie, who is like walking on the street, kind of crazy, and she comes to someone's house, and this is Laura Dern
in her role as Nikki the actress.
Yeah, exactly.
Nikki Blue.
No, Nikki Grace.
Oh.
Sue Blue is her character.
All right.
So
Laura Dern is Nikki Grace. So Grace Zabriskie, who I'm going to call Polish woman.
Yeah, she has this weird comedy accent, and she comes to visit her in her Hollywood mansion,
her
basically.
Bel Air mansion, yes.
Yeah, that again, this is one of the points where like the video, the TV really shines, quote unquote, because it's kind of fantastic how creepy the place is, because the DV is really bad at handling light.
By DV, you mean digital video.
The digital video, yeah.
Yeah.
Is really bad at handling light. So inside she has these lights on, like these yellow lights. And outside, it's the middle of the day, it's a very sunny day, and there's sun coming in through the glass in the window, windows and the doors. But it's like a jarring contrast between this searing white pool of light that is like this.
It's like they've gone into a completely different world.
That has no detail to it. It's like this searing pool of light, and this interior that feels almost like a cave with like candlelight. It's very weird, but that's on purpose,
Yeah.
And so Grace Zabriskie starts telling her, doing all kinds of a weird, asking weird questions about the movie that she has been trying for. She's there's the idea that she is kind of past her prime. And that she is sort of trying to come back. This is going to be like her comeback film.
Right. That Grace Zabriskie is asking Laura Dern about the movie that she's trying out for. That she's
auditioning for. And, she doesn't know if she's going to get it or anything. Grace Zabriskie says, oh, you will get it, And so she starts talking about an unpaid debt. Says a very interesting, very David Lynch thing. Tells her this old story about how a boy went out, opened the door and went out into the world, fascinated by the world. And then as the boy went by the door, that his reflection followed him.
A little boy went out to play. When he opened his door, he saw the world. As he passed through the doorway, he caused a reflection. Evil was born. Evil was born and followed the boy.
And again, it's like David Lynch has very much this theme of dualities and evil dualities, like especially specifically with mirrors, like the ending of Twin Peaks, of the Twin Peaks season 2.
It's a repeating motif with a lot of his work.
Right. That the Twin Peaks, the whole thing with Bob in the mirror and all that.
And, Lost Highway.
Lost Highway too.
The duality of the main characters in Mulholland, and
Yeah, there's a lot of dualities, and so this story figures into that, and then she talks about a variation of the story where the girl went out into the marketplace and went into a back alley and stuff, and so it all feels very weird, very strange.
An old tale. And the variation. A little girl went out to play. Lost in the marketplace, as if half-born. Then, not through the marketplace, you see that, don't you? But through the alley behind the marketplace. This is the way to the palace.
But the weirdest thing about that scene is how it ends, that she says, oh, you could think that it was 9:45 and it would actually be past midnight. Yeah. And she says, for example, you could be on that couch, and she points to this couch, and Laura Dern looks towards it and sees herself in that couch with her friends as she's celebrating that she got the part. And in a way, to me, of course, the movie propels you. You kind of not keeping that in mind all the time.
Yeah.
But this is the moment that we'll come back to at the end of the movie. So this whole movie could be seen as a kind of fugue, as a kind of dream, and or
like a vision of the future that she's having right now.
Exactly, or a kind of vision of the future. Yeah. So she sees herself and she's celebrating that she got the part.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start seeing her husband, that he's looking at her kind of suspiciously and stuff. And her husband is another one of these people that we'll see throughout that is the same person, but in different places and different times, basically.
Yeah. And he looks like, kind of like a powerful mob heavy. Like, this is a dangerous man, but he looks like a businessman.
Right. He is kind of like a Polish gangster in a way.
Right. And, even then, that's like, this is all assumptions, because we're not told anything much about him, except you get the idea that he's a dangerous man and you don't fuck around with his wife.
The next scenes sets up the meeting between Nikki, Laura Dern, of course, and the rest of the cast and crew.
Yeah.
Not all the cast, which is very interesting, but the main cast, which is her, Justin Theroux, who plays her lover in the movie, and the director, who is played by Jeremy Irons, which I love his performance in this movie.
Yeah.
He's
not hamming it up at all.
No, he's fantastic. He has sometimes I look at his performance and he has these great little personality tics almost, that he's like he's telling you so much with his physical performance about the character.
Yeah.
That as when sometimes he seems to be like recalling something, and then he just scratches his neck and he goes like, oh, fear, this, blah, 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 and it's such a great performance. And basically he's a movie director that he's doing this movie called On High and Blue Tomorrow. And there's some scenes of this guy, Justin Theroux character, is supposed to be like a womanizer kind of guy. So he's kind of more like his character, basically.
Yeah. And at On High Blue Tomorrows, it seems to be sort of a dramatic film about, a cheating wife and a Lothario. But the story behind this movie is that the script's been going around, and like a few people have tried to produce it, and it just hasn't happened. It's like a cursed movie.
Well, it hasn't happened because the leads keep dying.
Right.
At least in the there's been an old German production, 4-7, apparently 4-7, which the meaning of is never explained in the movie, although we do see 4-7 later on.
Yeah.
There's some things that are there, there's a lot of things that are never explained, but this is one of these that there's not even an inkling of what it might be, why it's called 4-7.
And then, like, then again, you might feel like you're also kind of crazy yourself looking for patterns in places where there are none. But, like the numbers 4-7 come up, and, internet theories abound, I'm sure. But
well, I don't know, if
like,
I guess the Inland Empire boards, if there's such a thing.
But it's like, this is like a possible handhold for you to grasp onto, but a lot of times it just, it's
and I
loose
think
stones.
It's just delightful and as mysterious as this like old German production from the 30s. So you would think that it's like something like very avant-garde, and stuff like that. And it's called just 47, 4-7. Not even, it's not 47, it's actually 4-7.
Yeah.
But it comes to light. So he eventually, the director has to share with the actors that this movie is a remake, technically, sort of a remake, that they had been trying to do it before, but they say that it's cursed. Again, like you say, it's kind of like a cursed script, like a cursed production, and the leads in the original production were murdered.
And like, we don't really find out a whole lot about the plot of this movie, but we find a little bit about the characters in it, which is Laura Dern, Justin Theroux. The actors are kind of like beginning to form that affair with the dangerous husband, and that also seems to be the case in the movie. So the actors are inhabiting these characters without quite realizing it.
Well, to me, it's like the cool thing about it is that it presents something that is ultra novel, that I think the movie does not get enough credit for, that it presents a story, not just not a physical thing, but a story as a kind of magic artifact. It's like a cursed hope diamond, basically, that ensnares people in its logic, in the logic of the story. And if you think about it, it's kind of like a pattern of behavior that is almost evil and sentient, and it just ensnares people in its evil logic to their ruin, Yeah.
Right. It's like King in Yellow. If it's like a cursed evil play that, you read the script. All right, first one, I'm not too into it. If you read the second chapter, it gets its hooks into you. And if you read the third act, it makes you crazy.
The interesting thing about the King in Yellow, and there's definitely a relationship, I think, but I think the interesting about King in Yellow, or like something like the Necronomicon, is that those are physical things.
Right.
The King in Yellow it's a play. It's a written play.
Yeah.
Right. Fierce Even, like or what it's called, it's like an old Polish myth too. Polish myth that say it's like an ethereal thing. It's like a ghost, and it takes form in movies, in plays, in real life, but it's like an evil archetype almost. Yeah.
And that's kind of what can be said for a lot of the characters in this, is that they're not so much characters but archetypes.
Right. Yeah. It's like, its tale is almost as a tale as old as time. The
same story endlessly retold.
Transcending history and the world, a tale of soul and swords, eternally retold.
Oh yeah, there's the husband, the wife, the lover, it's almost like the king, the queen, the jack, that kind of thing, And it's interesting that while we know, so in the On High and Blue Tomorrows seems at times to be in the movie as some sort of like a Southern fried kind of setting,
cheating heart romance.
Yeah, with there's a scene that they're talking in this gazebo, and there's like all this golden light and stuff, and the music is very romantic and everything. But we also know from On High Blue Tomorrows has like trailer park setting, basically. Which is very weird that it shifts between two, and those two are supposed to be, we don't get all the parts of this movie. Of this movie within the movie. We just get pieces of it, and the pieces are kind of weird together. But I think it goes to, because in that scene where they're like in this gazebo with the blue light and stuff, they look like they're rich, for example.
Yeah. It's like they're living in like some nameless era antebellum South thing.
Well,
At the
I mean,
same time,
they're dressed modern, but yeah,
oh
but
yeah, but
but
you know, like
it wants to show
Southern
that
royalty, yeah, that kind of thing. But at the same time, we have trailer trash down the block, and it's like this world is.
Well, yeah, well, exactly. What I think is the idea is that again, it's the archetype. It happens to rich, it happens to poor, it happens to American, it happens to Polish. You know,
Yeah.
it's like it's more than that. It's more than this than the circumstance. Again, it's like an evil mold that traps people in its shape. You know, it's
Right.
kind of like Procrustes.
Yeah.
You know, like shaping people into his bed.
He has a magical bed that fits everybody who gets onto it. Either if you're too short, it stretches you out, or if you're too long, he just cuts your feet off. You know,
It's
Greek
kind of,
mythology. It's full of great guys.
but I think that's kind of like how this works. You know, this archetype that is presented here, and I think as another thing is interesting is that we know that there's a character for Nikki and Sue's husband, basically Sue's husband, right?
Yeah.
Smitty. And Smithy seems to be another person, which I thought was fantastic. This is something that I think I only noticed on my last viewing. It seems like, because it's very female focused and it's very Laura Dern focused, which is great. But it seems to me that the men in the movie, of course, the Justin Theroux character, and very importantly, her husband, Smithy, they are actually trapped in those roles too. And you can tell because sometimes they seem like in the performances, they seem like they're kind of confused as to where they are, what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very subtle way of showing that this is something that traps people. And you know, we're only seeing her perspective, but it's conceivable that they're going through something similar too, you
Right.
know?
So Smithy is Laura Dern's husband in the story
And
of
on High and Blue Tomorrows.
On High and Blue Tomorrows. And you would think he would be an important character, but you never find the actor. You don't see who he is in any of the meetings.
Right, he does not show up because the only actors that we see from the movie, even from all the scenes, it's just them.
Yeah,
Laura
Justin Theroux
Dern
and
Justin Theroux. Yeah, and there's an interesting aside that is, you know, I never knew what the hell it was, but only after reviewing the movie and watching it this last time, there's a part where Jeremy Irons says like on a very in between scenes, he goes like, and my 19-year-old niece keeps asking in that ancient foreign voice of hers, who is playing Smithy?
It's the 90-year-old niece. Yeah. Ever since we went into pre-production, she's been fascinated by Smithy. Keeps going on and on about Smithy. Asking in that ancient foreign voice of hers, who is playing Smithy?
And I'm like, what is that? What is that? What ancient foreign voice? And then I thought that what a fantastic clue. The line is drawing attention to the fact that there's someone trapped in that Smithy character too, because the niece who asks is young and old simultaneously, because it's another iteration of the same spirit, basically. It sort of recognizes them. And I thought that was, I know it's kind of weird, but
yeah.
I thought that was very, very strange, very, very cool. And that's another layer of this movie that I just love, that sometimes you just turn some things in your mind a little bit and you go like, oh my God, you know, that figures into it. I never noticed, you know?
Oh my God, I'm a crazy person. What? Okay. Some rando line is just like, oh, so this character inhabits this in like a sort of mental space. And I'm like, how did you arrive to that conclusion? And
you mean me or him?
In general, how did you arrive to that conclusion? It's like this whole thing seems crazy to me.
Well, it is,
Yeah.
but I think that's part of the craziness of the movie, because it's sort of, everyone seems to be, it's a very weird, like every Lynch movie, but this movie in particular has a very weird atmosphere, I think. Very strange. sometimes the people don't seem like people at all. It's like there's a lot of strangeness in the movie that Mulholland Drive didn't have. You could conceive of Betty as a real person. You could conceive of Diane as a real person, but the characters here, even the ones that are supposed to be real characters, feel archetypal.
Yeah, like they're so roughly sketched that
strange,
you can't be,
and almost not like actual people. And that artificiality, I think, is on purpose.
But that ancient foreign voice.
Who's
Smithy.
playing Smithy?
It's like,
I always remember that line, and I was like, okay, what is that? That has to have a meaning. I was thinking that has to have a meaning, but I never thought, never understood why.
All right. Well, but yeah, as the characters are like reading these lines and sort of getting into character and like inadvertently reproducing like some of the situations that are in the movie without even realizing it. Keep in mind, don't lose sight of this, because I already have that the girl that was being harangued by her pimp at the beginning of the movie, who the lost girl,
she's still there.
She's still there. Keep her in your mind.
Yeah, almost like the movie, you could think of the movie as we are watching it through her eyes almost, because she's like watching it from this hotel room that it seems to be out of place and out of time.
Yeah,
which is very deliberate. The whole thing about that it could be the 1930s, it could be the 1950s, it could be the 2010s.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a TV, but it has a very lodge kind of feel, like the Black Lodge in Twin Peaks. Yeah, there's a very lodge kind of feeling to it.
But there's like a great scene where Laura Dern and Justin Theroux and Jeremy Irons are all sitting at a table with Harry Dean Stanton, who is like, he's a producer, isn't he?
Yeah, he's so funny in that movie.
Right, but they're all sitting there like reading the lines, and one of the characters spots somebody in like a part of the scenery in the background. And it's like, I didn't think anybody was at the studio today. And then it's like they go to see who that was. There's a part where
Justin Theroux goes to see it.
Yeah. And like there's a part where Laura Dern goes through a door marked Axon Inn in an alleyway, and it kind of like leads to that house set in the studio. And then like she sees through the window of this house set her and Justin Theroux sitting at the table with Jeremy Irons and Harry Dean Stanton reading lines.
There's a moment later on in the movie when that happens.
Yeah. And it's like she kind of realizes that she's like seeing a thing that's already happened from a different perspective. And it's at this point that the movie kind of drops out from under me and I get lost for the next 2 hours.
Well, I think that's part of we're not exactly at the break yet, but part of the movie when there's a break with reality. So Nikki continues to work on the movie with Devin. That's the name of the Justin Theroux character, Devin, and he plays a Billy. The name of the character, Billy Side, which was funny because it's BS, and he's the man with the side pieces.
Yeah,
and and it's so great. And but at the same time, it's like it's Billy Side and Nikki Blue, Side and Blue, Side and Blue. It's kind of like that alliteration kind of thing. I thought it was great. You even think about the names, and it's like there's a little thing there too. And so so she continues to work, and there's a point where she is filming a scene, and of course there's a lot of things that are happening in between that we're not talking about.
Yeah,
because you really have to see it.
And even then you won't understand what's happening.
Well, but I hope this helps, Yeah. And I hope this podcast makes it so that people will give the movie a chance, because I think it really deserves it. Even among Lynch fans, I think it really deserves it.
Yeah.
So there's a point where she's doing the scene with first of all, she the actress starts having an affair with Devon, who's the actor.
Yeah.
So they start to mirror their characters. So that are having an affair in the movie, they start having an affair in real life.
And there's like a scene where they're like having like a tender moment with each other, not unlike not unlike an opening skit in a recent podcast that we did. And she kind of like breaks character for a moment. And it's like, God, this sounds like we're reading lines for a movie. And
yeah, this sounds like dialogue from our movie.
Yeah, and then you hear Jeremy Irons yell "cut."
Yeah,
and there's like a bit, and the camera draws back, and there's like a bit of confusion that like Laura Dern and Justin Theroux aren't in this intimate moment. They were in the scene of their movie, and
right. So one of the great
kind of
things
lost track of things.
One of the great things about the movie is that it not only is her character lost, it loses you.
Yeah.
In that unreality, the unreality feeling of this movie is amazing, and it's difficult, but it's amazing because
and it's shot in digital, the realist format.
It's a great experience, and I just want to say that with digital, with regards to like when Justin Theroux goes to the back to look for whoever was supposedly back there in the flat of Smithy's house. It's a very scary moment because, again, the DV makes the blacks look really dead, really black, or like sort of like there's some artifacting in the light and stuff.
Yeah, like pixelation, visual artifacts sort of thing.
Yeah,
the darkness is alive.
So it's like you don't know what's hiding in the shadows almost. It feels like it's very, very anxiety inducing. And I think he's using the power of the lo-fi to do that, and you see that for example, there's some games, newer games on the internet, for example, that like indie games that use on purpose very lo-fi kind of graphics and stuff in order to stimulate that feeling of dread. And I think Lynch was, one of the things that was great about him using that format is that he managed to bring his touch to it and use that lack of definition. But anyway,
and like a lot of shots in this movie are like right up in characters' faces, because like any further back, you'll probably miss like details on these characters' faces and their expressions. But because it's so close to these characters, the whole movie feels very claustrophobic.
Yeah, and it's very uncomfortable. I think it's on purpose that it's very uncomfortable. And so this movie is about roles that people, and women in particular, play in life. Roles, which is also why it's the meta aspect of it is a movie. Because in a movie has people playing a fantasy roles. So, women end up being the wife, the lover, etc. So there was an interesting quote that Lynch opened screenings of Inland Empire at the time, which I think says a lot about the movie, which is a quote from the Upanishads that says, "We are like the spider. We weave our life and then move along it. We are like the dreamer who dreams and then lives in the dream." And that's a beautiful quote. It's in Twin Peaks season 3 too. Monica Bellucci shows up and says that. But I think the point is that these are people trapped in roles that they are also of their own making, that they could break with this fantasy, but they're submerged and thrown into the world. There's a lot of existentialist philosophy in a way to Lynch, in this case in particular, but in Lynch movies in particular, because the characters are thrown into this world, and the reason that they get trapped in these roles and in stories is because they don't realize that they are the ones that are making this reality, that they could break with it.
Right. But it would never occur to them because they are the character that they've made of themselves.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They're submerged in them.
And they can't transcend the way David Lynch does with this transcendental meditation he's always talking about.
Well, I mean, not just that, but Yeah, he is a very proselytizing about that.
Right. But
you
it's
gotta listen. You gotta listen to the Maharishi.
it's like that's
And this bunch in Washington, if only they listen to the Maharishi.
but yeah, like we've been going through the book Room to Dream.
Oh yeah,
And
so what a great book.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed that.
kind of like a David Lynch biography / autobiography.
Mhm.
And like listening to it, because who has time to read anymore? You hear about like kind of what he's going through in his life whenever he's making these movies, and then you kind of like you're able to visualize how much stuff that he actually went through is like mirrored in the film. You kind of see echoes of it through other movies, and then it's like it puts it into a different perspective. So the idea of being stuck in a story of your own making, like the identity you've made for yourself and being trapped in it, but possibly able to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that has something to do. I'm just asking questions.
Well, I mean, again, this movie is not just one thing, because like you were saying, some people say like, oh, it's a satire of Hollywood and this and that, but it's actually more than one thing. It's several things, and I think that there's the whole supernatural cursed aspect of it, but there's also the redemptive aspect of it, and the ending I think is one of the most hopeful that his movies, certainly as compared to like Mulholland Drive, for example, which is an amazing movie but has a terrifying ending. And Mulholland Drive reminds me of the ending of Fire Walk with Me.
Anyway, our reality break has occurred. Laura Dern has come unstuck in time.
Yeah, well, in a way, she may be stuck in her head, unstuck in her head. That's the interesting thing, that to me is like the idea of Axon N, for example, which is a weird name, but axon has to do with the brain, with the like synapses of the brain and stuff.
Yeah,
and
the receiving parts of nerves. Go on.
Right. So in a way, it's kind of like theater of the mind. And this goes with transcendental meditation too. But I don't think that it was on purpose. But the fact that we create our reality in our minds, basically, it's a very true idea. Everything that we create in the world, we create in our minds. First was immaterial. The plot continues, and she, again, that we had mentioned, she has a big break with reality, basically. At that point, you kind of lose sight of Nikki the actress, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's marked in a very scary manner. I love what happens, that she's got some groceries and she's going behind a studio, right? And she's going to her car, and then she sees in the back of, like you mentioned, she sees Axon N written on a wall.
Yeah.
And she goes into this studio and she sees herself the day before, with Devon and everything. And as Devon comes to check, she runs away and she goes into the flat. A flat is like having theater, what looks like a house, but it's just a cardboard cutout, basically, or wooden.
The Smitty's house set.
She goes into the set, yeah, and she opens a door and closes it, and Justin Theroux is looking through the window of this set, and she can see him, but he cannot see her. And then she looks again, and she is in a completely different place. Like she is inside a real house now. Like the light changes and she is inside this house that's like a very, in a very David Lynch manner, is very like modern kind of looking,
right.
Like modernist kind of looking.
And like all the walls are kind of painted yellow and stuff, and it's like a modern house, but it's like a very humble home.
Yeah. So but also she looks out the window and she doesn't see the set anymore. And she just sees like a yard and a street. And to me, that moment is one of the most terrifying that I've seen in any of his movies, because the thought that your curiosity could take you somewhere that you don't know, just you could open a door and then drop out from the world, basically. That I find absolutely terrifying, and
Yeah.
that's a fantastic moment in the movie.
Right. And this horrible new place that she's found herself in is she's a domestic housewife in a small home.
Right. So at this point, we're starting to have flashes of other versions of herself and of other characters too.
Yeah.
Because we see her as Sue Blue, like the character from On High, and she also finds herself in Poland in the 1930s, I think, and sometimes she finds herself in this low-lit hotel room where there's a bunch of other girls that are talking about Devon, for example.
There's sort of a Greek chorus, but at the same time, you get the idea that it's just like a gaggle of working girls.
Yeah, well, sometimes they are like prostitutes on the street. Sometimes they aren't.
And it's like
and she's always asking them, like, "Tell me if you've seen me before."
Right.
Because
sort of like she's in like a collective unconscious of womanhood, and with the other archetypes of women's.
Yeah, women's. But and there's also, there's other characters that we see. Like, for example, there's also Julia Ormond, who is this disheveled lady that shows up at a police station with a screwdriver stuck into her side, and her name is Doris Side, the wife of Billy Side, who
has a screwdriver in her side.
Well, she is the wife of the Justin Theroux character in the movie. But she
Did not
says
put that together.
But she says that, that's the thing, that this is a movie that you have to pull apart later. She says that there's a man that told her that she had to go and kill someone with that screwdriver, that hypnotized her. Yeah, she says that. And this is one of our first mentions, direct mentions. I mean, we've seen him, but of the character of the Phantom. The Phantom is a very, very sinister character. It's this like a wormy guy, a wormy Polish guy, who seems to have been at some point maybe someone's husband in the past, but who also seems to have a devastating power over women. He talks to like, for example, there's a point where he meets somewhere in the early 20th century, he meets a girl on the street who is the lost girl, who is the same girl that is watching stuff on TV that we've talked about. And he seems to enthrall her into falling into his web, basically. And there's another point where they show him pretty much doing like hypnotism, basically. And he is a character that goes in and out, and that has to do with this old Polish myth and basically the archetype of the story. So it is possible that he was the husband at some point. There's a so I don't buy all the theories, but there's a theory in the wiki that says that he was the original husband that made this curse, basically, and cursed his wife and her lover to sort of repeat the same story forever, and getting hurt every time and everything like that. And there's something to it, but I think there's a lot more about how the Phantom, and again, it's the Phantom, quote unquote, so he is a kind of a ghost, is a kind of ghost in women's minds, I think. Right. Is the power, is the unspoken power that men have over women that women have been raised to heed, basically. Right.
Like the fear of the jealous husband. He is the dark man. It's like why women are afraid of men. He is that archetype.
Right. He's the guy that could kill you.
Yeah. He's the guy. Or make you do things that you don't want to do.
Right, exactly. Which he's a very, very, very strange character in that way. He kind of reminds me a bit of the Robert Blake character in Lost Highway.
Yeah.
he has that kind of presence, even though he seems a lot more, I don't know, down to earth maybe. But and I think later in the movie it bears out that he is a phantom that inhabits the corridors of the mind of women, and Nikki in particular, I think.
Of cheating women everywhere. No.
Well, not just that, because it's a kind of fear of men, also fear of the power that they have over women. So he shows up, and so we see him in different times and everything. Like, again, we're not gonna talk every scene in the movie.
Right. Well, we like see all these different scenes in the movie, and you know, it's all shot with the digital video that on the whole looks horrible and murky, and you're not quite sure where you are in most of it. And
there's a part that I think that more trying parts. I think at least that I found, which is it's great performance, but Laura Dern is like she goes up and sits down to talk
like
to
a
a
private
guy.
detective, or just a guy.
This is like an accountant, basically, like in this brown room, nondescript. Everything looks very dirty.
Right, and you have no idea who these characters are, but she's like, she's just like monologuing to this guy who's just sitting there listening.
Yeah.
Not unlike you right now. No.
Yeah.
and
let me tell you, that accent that she puts in.
Yeah, and she's like putting in this accent, and she's telling all of these
horrible stories about how she was raped when she was young, and she clawed some guy's eyes out, and again, it's kind of like a violence between men and women, which is very much the theme, because in the original story too, the original wife killed the husband with a screwdriver because he was cheating too. It's the idea, I think, is that there's a lot of latitude on that from what I see. So the screwdriver persists throughout the timelines, and it's kind of like a menacing presence. So then the character is the Laura Dern character, who we assume to be Sue, but we don't know, because she keeps flashing to the 1930s and Poland, and there's some weird scenes there. There's some weird scenes in like a trailer park, what looks like, and there's other scenes like you were mentioning that are like some backyard barbecue. Her husband, who's a doofus, the Smithy, is there. But eventually she ends up on the streets, like in Hollywood, like and she ends up wandering the streets, and like these prostitutes that either don't pay attention to her or just laugh at her
when she asks, "Have you seen me?" Because she's kind of aware that she's unstuck, and she's not sure who she is and where she is.
Exactly. She's connecting with different versions of herself, and you can tell that the people that she's talking to know her as a person. They probably think that she blanked out or something like that, and they kind of laugh at her and stuff. But then for the person that it's happening to would be super disorienting,
Yeah.
And so she's like, "Oh, have you seen me?" It's like basically, who am I? Where am I? Sort of kind of thing. And she ends up on the street where there's another bit of that's, I think, is fantastic in the movie, where she meets these characters. David Lynch always can make these characters that are very resonant and very strange, but sometimes very real too. It's like these people sleeping on the streets, that basically homeless people, and one of them is like a local California person that is from Pomona. And then there's another girl that she seems like she's from Japan or something.
Has like a really thick accent, and she's just and she starts telling her that she starts telling the story about a girl that she knows with the snow white hair, and she has a monkey, and and she's like a party girl, but she's basically starving, but she's just trying to live off of that, and so she gets like these diseases, and she gets like a hole inside her body. Is very weird and very icky. And it's like guy sitting next to her while she's telling the story, played by Terry Crews.
Terry Crews, that's right. Yeah.
He's like, damn, when she's like
Yeah.
describing this character's fistula.
Yeah, it's awful, but I think I love the realness of that scene, the weird realness of that scene, because it has a surreal aspect to it, but there's also the reality that homeless people live very tough lives, and healthcare is not one of the things that they have access to, you know.
Right.
And some of them, you know, a lot of them have to live, you know, like that girl's friend. They have to live sort of skimming the surface, not to sink, basically. The Laura Dern character sort of takes her place there with them, and she, you know, she kind of lays down on this cold floor, dirty. And again, the DV in that scene makes it look like a news report, makes it look like reality TV, makes it look scuzzy and bad, but in a good way. It just makes it really dirty. It just makes you feel there.
Right.
You know?
And I don't know if there was there a scene when this happened, or am I just remembering it wrong? Is the movie unpacking itself in my mind? But was there a scene where somebody stabbed her with the screwdriver? Because like evidently, like, you look down and realize she is stabbed with a screwdriver, and she's like dying on the pavement there next to these characters.
Doris goes by and stabs her, like the lady that had the screwdriver on her side.
Yeah,
she goes by and stabs her and goes away and runs away. But and then she vomits blood over like the stars, you know, like the and that's
on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Yeah,
the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So, and that's Hollywood and Vine. So again, Hollywood and Vine is like the corner, you know, is the synecdoche in a way of Hollywood. You know, it's like where all the glamour and the stars, you know, it's like Hollywood. You know, it's like there's the Marilyn Monroe movie that you haven't seen, and I love her in the movie, but I hate the movie. But anyway, long story short, she's like this like country girl from like Alabama or something like that. She's trying to travel west to California to get to Hollywood, and throughout she's trying to survive by like being a show, you know, sort of like stripping and stuff like that. And she has this map that she's created with it has a straight line to California, and in particular Hollywood and Vine. And she says it, Hollywood and Vine, you know, that's where you get discovered, and then you get treated with respect, you know.
You can see by this just how straight my direction is. River Gulch is where I started. This is where I am now, and look where I'm going. Where? Hollywood and Vine. Look, straight as an arrow. River Gulch, Hollywood and Vine.
What happens when you get there?
What happens, honey? You get discovered, you get tested with options and everything, and you get treated with a little respect too.
Yeah.
And it's very sad. It's just that movie's so sad. That movie's it's an ultra sad character, but I think that's reflected in the characters that are there being homeless on Hollywood and Vine. You know, these are the people that didn't make it. Right. You know, that's Hollywood. You know, like the people that came and made it to the stratosphere, and the people that just sunk to the bottom. You know, of the sea, you know, and they're forgotten. I love that critique that, you know, you think about it, but, you know, there's for every person that made $1 million in a movie, there's 1,000 that are barely scraping by, you know.
They're going hungry and sleeping on pavement.
Or, yeah, exactly. Or had their hearts broken and had to leave, you know, and everything.
The Marilyn Levin Starlight Celebrity Show will be back next week from Hollywood, California, where stars make dreams and dreams make stars.
Which is why one of the reasons that, you know, why I love that movie. That movie is Showgirls too. Pennies from Heaven.
Yeah.
Because forget about, you know, unconnected, right? But to me, that movie shows like sort of like the people that didn't make it but kind of made it, sort of like being weirdos on their own on their own terms. I kind of love that about that. But in this movie, it's fantastic that you see Laura Dern vomiting over the Hollywood stars. And
there's like another homeless lady there. It says, "Lady, you dying."
Yeah, it's just a lady, you dying. It's just like you're on high now. No more blue tomorrows.
Right, and this is kind of like where the fragmented movie starts to come back together
a little bit. Yeah,
it's like this is like a long solid scene. You've not transitioned to other characters or a different universe all of a sudden. You're sticking like with this one shot of her laying here like bleeding out on the pavement with these other actors telling this like weird, or not other actors, other people telling this weird story. And then the camera pans out a little bit, and then you hear Jeremy Irons yell "cut."
And you see the cameras, see, all the big cameras and everything.
You see the big cameras and everything. And like
it's
everybody
a magical moment. I think
everybody starts to get up and like, break from the scene. And Laura Dern is still lying there like she actually is dead.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, like she sort of comes to and like the nightmare is over.
Yeah, but she's kind of shell shocked, the way that she leaves,
Right. But it's like, oh my God, is it finally over? And then like this focal point sort of becomes like a part where all the ends come together, and then it frays out a little bit where we get to the redemption arc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is at the end of the hard part, and I think not, that's the hardest part of the movie and the character too. And bear in mind that when Jeremy Irons says "cut," we finally see Nikki again. We haven't seen her like in an hour of movie or something like that.
Yeah.
She's been wandering. She's been, we've seen a bunch of other characters. She's been ping-ponging through the eras and, being different people. And it's very dizzying. And then he says "cut," and and there's this weird close-up into the camera, and we see her. And she kind of gets up, and she kind of like a walking wounded kind of thing. She gets up and goes off on a daze, and Jeremy is like, "Oh, we're done. We've finished the movie. All the principal shots are done.
That's a wrap. You were great. Love it." And it's like, and you're back to like the most established reality of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it would seem, but
then she kind of, and again, this is one of the most explicit parts of the movie, I think. She wanders into like a projection room where she can see herself.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes into this, what looks like these weird apartment kind of, or hotel kind of place. And it's like very, very low lit, very weird shadows. And again, the DV here doing a lot of work in that regard, the awful DV, but I think it's well used. These sort of narrow passages, and wandering in those corridors is the phantom, which I think is like the corridors of the mind in a way. And she shoots the phantom, and then the phantom turns into the face. There's this very digital but strange
like a morphed version of her face. Because I think in a way what it's trying to say is that the phantom is an aspect of herself, has become an aspect of herself. Sort of like, when you have something inside you that is very negative and very self-hating and all that, right?
And then it turns into like a weird deformed version of herself, and of like a weird clown with some blood coming out of its face and stuff.
Right.
It's very strange.
Mentally she has gone in and killed her fear.
Exactly. She has killed this, it's like it's that thing from the 60s, there's a policeman in your mind and he must be killed. It's sort of like, there's a phantom in your mind and he must be destroyed. He must be destroyed, actually, not killed, destroyed. But another thing that I thought is fantastic is that throughout the movie we see what I call the rabbits.
Tell me about the rabbits, Vivian.
Yeah. So the Rabbits is this kind of weird sitcom. This is one of the weird aspects of the movie, which I remember when I watched it originally, I had seen, because I think the first website that I ever subbed to was David Lynch's website. In my life, and this was even back when I wasn't even in the US, but I wanted to be part of it, part of the David Lynch thing, and I actually subbed to his website for a few months. It's expensive for me, but and one of the things that he had among these other weird things, the weird experiments, was rabbits. It's basically a room where there's 3 people in rabbit costumes. There's a man and
they're dressed like normal people, but they have rabbit heads.
Yeah,
like big blocky foam rabbit heads, and
they have rabbit feet too and hands.
Oh, yeah. They are, in a sense, they are the 3 archetypes. The husband, the wife, and the lover.
They are, yes. So, and also, it's a very strange, because it's an angle that never changes, and the rabbits kind of say weird non sequiturs to each other. So they say to each other things that don't seem to connect, don't seem to make sense. Oh, it was the man in the green coat or something like that, and I think I'll go now, or it's a very weird kind of thing. And there's a laugh track going on, ha 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 ha, right, which is like going on, and there's a weird slow down train sounds.
Yeah, like a distant train whistle. And like the rabbits are all like speaking in haikus. They're speaking in haikus.
Yeah.
And they're talking past each other. They're not talking to each other, but they're just like saying their lines just sort of past the other.
That's right. And there's a point where when she's in that corridors, in those weird corridors, which kind of remind me a little bit of House of Leaves in a way, of those the horror of sort of empty corridors. She comes to a door that says 47, room 47, and that's Fears Even, from the the original German production, quote unquote. And in that door, we know that's where the rabbits are, because they have shown us that door is the door to the rabbits.
Yeah.
And after she kills the Phantom and she opens that door, there's nothing in there. It's as if there had never been anything. It's just an empty room.
Right, but it is the same room, and you see
it is the very same room.
You see it
from a different angle.
Right, from a different angle for once. And there are no rabbits, and it's just a room.
It's just a room. That's right.
And then it's like immediately from there that like she almost steps out of the TV to the lost girl.
Yeah, she sort of at that point, I think she sort of sees herself, because she hadn't seen herself in the movie theater. She had sort of like stepped into this reality, and now she sees herself seeing herself on the screen, basically, of the movie theater. And so there's something happening with the lost girl. And there's a beautiful moment when, after this, because this part with the Phantom and everything is very intense, very tense, very intense. Yeah. And I like that when she opens the door, it's like the rabbits that have these sort of non sequiturs things and stuff. And again, the main thing about the rabbits is confusion. You kind of feel that there has to be something there, but it's like almost like there isn't.
You're like in a world of the Charlie Brown adults. You can't understand what they're saying,
right?
But you recognize, like, by the looks of them, that they're what they are.
Yeah,
archetypes.
That there's meaning. But I think when she opens it and there's nothing there, I think is in a way she exercised a part of her mind. I think she exercised these ghosts that were talking non sequiturs in her mind, basically. Right.
She cast out her Thetans.
And so she eventually steps through the TV of the girl that's watching and kisses her. And I think that's the moment that the lost girl kind of wakes up, because she's been absorbed crying in front of the TV. And she wakes up basically. And she sees on the TV, one of the things that she sees is the other girls running through the corridors of this weird hotel that she seems trapped in. That they're just running out and laughing, because they have been freed too.
Right.
And then the door opens of her room and she can escape, and she finally walks back into her own reality, I think.
Right. And she breaks out of the archetype that she had been ganged into.
Right.
And their lives can continue with them fully in control now.
Right. She kind of goes back to her family, it looks like.
She goes back to the house that Nikki had been in.
Before we move on to that, is how earned that moment is when Laura Dern comes out of the TV, appears there in front of the TV and kisses her and saves her, basically. And it's awesome that you have gone through so much hell, but it's such a relief, such a positive feeling. Lynch can really do beautiful moments too. And the fact that you've gone through all this darkness to get to it really elevates it to a magical level. And there's a song by by David Lynch and Christabel called Polish Poem, which is
we'll have it playing underneath as we go.
Yeah, we'll have it. So it's a beautiful song, and is it's an apotheosic feeling. It's just amazing how you sort of go you finally can breathe, and
Right.
and I think that's part of the journey that it takes you with the character of Laura Dern. It takes you with her into this dark and terrible journey. And so finally, the lost girl can returns to her family, and even the other girls, it seems like they're escaping this. And to me, this almost feels like, because you could see it in very different ways. You could say this is the prison, the mind prison that they are in, but also it could be a metaphysical prison. I guess it's kind of like the lodge,
Yeah.
where these women have been put in there by the Phantom,
Right.
by his powers of suggestion,
By their fear of men.
and by their fear of him,
Yeah.
but he's a kind of a supernatural figure.
Yeah.
And so it's such a great feeling when she comes out, and I think that's one of the parts of the movie where what's going on, and I think that's on purpose. It's like, okay, she's walking through reality, she's blah blah. But one of the things that I thought was fantastic, because at the very end of the movie, we come back to that first moment of Grace Zabriskie talking to Laura Dern, Nikki, the actress, at her house, and where she had pointed. And we come back to this, but she has changed, and she sees herself in the couch, and she's smiling. And then it cuts, and we'll talk about the very final part of the credits.
Yeah.
And with the music swelling, and it's fantastic. It's like something's happening. You don't know exactly what happened, but something really good has happened that has carried you with it. And I think that's fantastic about the movie.
Laura Dern has killed the Mind Phantom, and she has become Laura the White, and she is ascending, and she's saving the lost girl, and she's freeing all the other women of their bonds and stuff, and she herself is freed too. And because and she's able to do this because she is an actress, a person capable of inhabiting all roles, and through her art, she is able to ascend and inspire other people to ascend too.
Well, I think that's fantastic about this, and again, I think it speaks to the power of cinema, right? That I think David Lynch is very much a believer in, in the power of stories. It means that we can have cathartic encounters with movies. They make us realize things about our lives that we wouldn't otherwise, by us inhabiting these characters, us going into these characters for the duration of the movie. We end up feeling refreshed in our own lives, and we end up getting insights about our own lives, and I think that's kind of like the power of stories. And in this case, all the stuff that we've been saying, and this is kind of out there, but maybe in a weird metaphysical kind of way within the movie, maybe she, by going and doing this as an actress, like you said, by having that power that she has of being able to withstand the onslaught of identities and confusion, she's actually able to save all of the women connected with it, and maybe break the curse. I think that's the feeling of the movie at the end, that the curse has been broken. in a way.
Yeah, yeah. And that, good triumphs and all that.
Mhm.
And Falcon says on your left, and then all the other dead people from the Avengers show up in Endgame, and there's a big CGI slugfest, and it's great. It's so cathartic.
And then they cut his head off.
Oh no, that happened earlier. Oh wait,
Oh, okay, never mind.
wait, no, that was another movie. This is another movie. Sounds like our podcast. Holy shit.
What year is this? So, and at the end, there's this very weird scene over the credits, like under the credits, sorry. The credits are running over this scene where it's like they're playing Sinner Man, like Nina Simone's Sinner Man, which, Sinner Man, it's, it says Sinner Man, where are you going to run to? And I think that it has to do with the awakened female power. Right. Within her, this kind of determination, it's like, I'm not going to be your plaything, basically. And I think it's interesting that at the end, you see all these, even like cameos from like Laura Harring, for example, from Mulholland Drive shows up. It's like this room with all these characters dancing around and singing and sort of laughing and stuff. And I think what they are.
You see Nastasia Kinski with her monkey and
yeah, and the lady with one leg too.
Mm-hmm. Also a lumberjack who's just there, just sawing a log.
I was gonna say a lumberjack sawing a log. I think what they are characters.
Mm-hmm.
Have been talking about characters and being trapped in characters and everything, but I think what they are is characters, and they all inhabit her mind. Laura Dern is sitting there and sort of looking at everyone and sort of smiling and everything. I think she's kind of at peace in her mind. It's sort of the idea. And those are characters inhabiting her mind. And they're the same kind of characters that we've seen throughout the whole movie. And it's a very weird ending, I remember when I first watched this, I was like, what? It was coming from Mulholland at the time, Mulholland Drive, which was, a few years earlier. Which is a much more understandable kind of picture. You sort of kind of have
a much bleaker ending.
Much bleaker ending, but the story, there's a big break, tells you everything that's going on. Silencio. But in this movie, I kind of felt like David Lynch was going somewhere where I couldn't follow him, you know? And that coupled with the difficulty of the film in general, I think that after watching it again and everything, I think I finally get it, and I love it. I just think that it really needs a chance from anyone that loves film, and Lynch fans most definitely, that if you dig into its themes and everything, it's incredibly rewarding. I think.
As it grows in age, like people will reevaluate it and maybe start to understand and appreciate it.
I was thinking, the similar movie that I think got a similar kind of backlash is Fire Walk With Me, which again has a very, very strong female performance at the center. That movie is pretty much all Sheryl Lee. And this movie is pretty much all Laura Dern. And that movie was very intractable at the time too. And if you watch it today, coming from Twin Peaks, that's the funny thing. Again,
that was the reason it was so poorly received at the time. People wanted this. They had been, drip fed this diluted Twin Peaks, this like diluted amounts of David Lynch, like mixed with Mark Frost, and then they go, oh, they're making a Twin Peaks movie. I can't wait to see it. And they see the David Lynch cut of Twin Peaks.
I think much like again, like Inland Empire, it wants to draw you into that character's life. So you're experiencing the horror of the incest with Laura, and this weird, not just metaphysical horror, but which she is embroiled in, but also
spiritual horror, just
spiritual decadence in a way, like like all this seedy underside of Twin Peaks, which feels much more seedy than in the series, for example. It feels scary.
Oh yeah.
I was just gonna say that is great, and I think this movie I think is more difficult because it's not as straightforward as that.
Right. And you don't have like the background of Twin Peaks to fall back on. This is just like, you have Nikki, and she's an actress, and long story short, she is an avatar of all female imprisonment all throughout the ages. And
yeah, that's right. And it's sort of like the characters are sketches,
Yeah. They're
like
just
we were saying,
archetypes.
yeah,
Yeah.
more archetypal. Even they, again, they don't feel like real people almost.
Back to Twin Peaks, like that's something like when I'd first seen Fire Walk with Me, I had always heard that like, oh yeah, there's like hours of like footage that Lynch had cut and it's been lost to the ages or whatever. But like, recently like within the last 10 years, it became available.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
great.
like, and you can see like what a distinction it is between Fire Walk with Me and The Missing Pieces on one side, and like the divide between them, and it
Mhm.
makes them both that much more resonant and shows you what one is without the other and what
Mhm.
both of them together would be. But and you can
Yeah,
appreciate each as its own thing and understand each as its own thing. Like I understand why all this was cut, and I understand why I didn't understand this, and I
yeah.
understand.
But there's actually some extra stuff for Inland Empire too.
Yeah.
I've seen, it's called More Things That Happened. I've seen it, and I think it adds that there's some stuff that it adds, but it's already a difficult, confusing
Yeah.
movie as it is, and
That
there's
it
nothing
felt
that
more
it,
superfluous to me.
well,
I mean, it
it's something
reinforces
that
the theme,
it's
but
something that if yeah, and it gives maybe a few more details into some stories like the Phantom and the
mhm,
Lost Girl, for example, but it's fine.
yeah,
It's fine. It's fine without
it
it,
won't help you understand it.
No, it won't. But if you're a fan, definitely check them out.
I'm gonna go into my final thoughts about Inland Empire. Like, the first time I'd seen it, that was like, huh, well, that's very David Lynch. How about that? I don't understand it, and
Hmm.
I don't ever want to see it again. Was like my immediate first reaction. Like, you had to drag me to the theater this past time, and ever since I have grown and had this whole film podcast thing, I'm able to understand it more and understand like where
Mhm.
it lost me and why.
Yeah.
Um,
I think a lot of the way that it loses you is on purpose. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
it's very deliberate. And I'm not gonna start being like everything the master does is deliberate. Kind of like start sounding like a Kubrick fan or a
right.
or a Christopher Nolan fan. But I mean, I am a Kubrick fan,
Oh
and I
god,
think Christopher Nolan's okay, but it's
yeah.
like not
I'm,
starting to think that anything and everything is as the master intended it. But what I'm saying is that it's definitely very deliberate. The feeling when you get lost, when she gets lost, you get lost, and that's she gets lost in this maelstrom of time and identities
right.
in places that she has no clue, that she just pops in, she's like, what, and it's like, you're supposed to be feeling like that too.
Right. And that's like, one of the great immersive things about the film is that like as she is lost, you two are completely lost and you're getting lost in her character as well. My second view with you, like, like immediately reflecting in the theater, like in the car afterwards, like you were going all galaxy brain explaining everything to me. And I'm
Mhm.
like, wow, I don't remember any of this. And I was awake for the entire 3 hours. And it's like,
No, and then I started reading more about it, preparing for the podcast, and I was like, oh no, this is amazing, just sending you all these messages.
yeah. And like the way I think of it is like I'm able to follow the movie up until the reality part, and like
Mhm.
up until the reality break part,
Mhm.
and up until that reality break part, you get to see like little bits of David Lynch humor sprinkled throughout. Like Harry Dean Stanton's character is amazing, and Grace Zabriskie has like a couple lines that make me chuckle. And at one point, just one of them's talking about like the tagline for David Lynch's coffee, and like I'm getting
Yeah,
these
yeah.
references and like little jokes and stuff. And then when she's going through the sea of identities, there is nothing funny about any of this.
No, there's nothing funny, and I think there's a very deliberate cut in the
Mhm.
humor there, and
Yeah, again, like Twin Peaks and The Missing Pieces.
mhm.
And because like the trip through identities thing, I lost my footing with the movie and I became detached from reality. while I was watching it, and it's like it just sort of washed over me like a bunch of images, and I'm like, how do I follow this? What's happening? I'm so lost. Will I look rude if I get up and start crying? But towards the end of the movie, where like it sort of comes back into focus, and then you get the last scene, the whole thing, it kind of feels like a bad dream.
Mm-hmm.
Like
It is.
right, like a literal bad dream. Like you wake up and like you can't remember exactly what happened immediately, but
Mm-hmm.
like later on you get triggered by something that like you're driving and you start to think about something. It's like, oh yeah, did that happen to
Yeah.
me, or did I have a dream about that? And the immersive part of this whole movie is that it feels like a dream that you might have had while you remembered something.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think that's like very skillful, and like you don't want to watch it again because it is an ordeal, or
Uh-huh.
it's like everything looks bad, I don't understand what's happening. But like if you sit down on the therapist couch and you really analyze this stuff, and you get in
Mm-hmm.
touch with what's going on in the secret dream heart, you can finally move
Figure
on
out
with
what
your life. Yeah.
figure out what's going on. Yeah. Yeah. To me, now it happens to me that something that didn't used to, that I've actually gone back and reviewed parts of it. Like, there's that feeling, like you say, of there's like a nightmare,
Mhm.
basically, especially the part with her whole break. That part it feels almost like a jumbled disconnected, it feels like a jumbled disconnected nightmare.
Mhm.
But if you go back and review parts of it, you understand what they're meant to be. It's like the movie is incredibly compressed, and then just you can stretch it out and tear it out, and it all makes sense, it all paints a picture. And there's a lot of weird scenes that we didn't even touch on, or like the whole ritual aspect of how when Nikki has been there for a while in this sea of identities and times, and she hears from the lost girl makes contact with her, and seems to make contact with her, and tells her that there's a ritual that she has to follow, which is like you have to wear a watch, a particular watch, and you have to take a cigarette and make a hole in the silk of like an undergarment, basically,
Mhm.
and look through it. And she does this, and that actually leads to other parts of the movie. So there's this whole ritual aspect, which I thought was really interesting,
Adventure
as a
game
way
logic.
yeah, as a way of getting out of this nightmare, which is, again, is like, it's kind of
Or their
weird
dreamlike solutions. Yeah.
dreamlike solutions, exactly.
But yeah, I want to thank you for guiding me through this nightmare.
That was great. I really enjoyed it. Give it a chance.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's a great movie. It's not for everyone, but it's a great movie.
Right. Even though I was lost by this movie like twice, I still have faith that there's more here than there was in Tenet.
Yes.
This is a film by an actual master, not.
Yeah.
I'm Andy.
I'm Vivian, and we hope you enjoyed it.
All right. And if you have any comments or whatever, just send us a tweet at FAFcast.
Bye.
Bye.
Brutal fucking murder.